talking about, and speaking of South Carolina, because again, I know with you, again, being in the media circuit, you take the bias out of it. You talk about Clemson, you guys talk about everybody in the state, whatever, but you are a USC guy when you boil down to it. And I really want to ask you about, again, because I'm sure since your time in Florence, right? I mean, you've been talking Gamecocks. I mean, obviously you guys were covering everything, I'd imagine, or were you more local sports at that point?
When I was in Florence?
When you're in Florence.
When it came to football and college football,
okay.
Covered Gamecocks,
yeah,
Clemson,
yeah,
South Carolina State. Probably not as extensively as I do now, mainly because I was in Florence and it was a little more difficult. Like if we went up to Clemson to cover a football game, and I remember it was an afternoon game, and we barely made it back to Florence in time for the 11 o'clock show. They couldn't believe they picked that Saturday to do some construction on 26, which slowed us down. But no, we were big in football coverage. Basketball, this is, it was an incredible time to be in Florence covering basketball, because there was one year, it was the 1985, 1986, West Florence High School, they won the state championship with a lineup that they were calling the best starting lineup in the history of South Carolina at the time. They had 3-4 guys, maybe that went D1. Wilson High School, they had Patrick Sellers, and longtime basketball fans will remember that name because he played at UConn. And South Florence had a guy that went to Virginia Tech. So the games there in the city of Florence were just unbelievable. And get this, that same season, the Francis Marion women won a national championship, coached by Sylvia Hatchell, who went on to North Carolina. She won a championship there. She won 2 at Francis Marion. Socastee High School had this young lady named Beth Hunt. And before Asia Wilson was the USA Today National Player of the Year, Beth Hunt was the National Player of the Year. She went to Maryland before transferring to South Carolina. Wilson High School had Jolette Long, who is now an assistant coach under Don Staley. But Jolette was a point guard who went to Iowa, wound up spending some time with the Harlem Globetrotters. And she was also a head coach herself before going to Tennessee to be an assistant and then hooking up with Don. And all that happened, and I forgot, Hartsville girls won the state championship that year. So I had all that basketball going on and had very little time to pay any attention to Gamecock basketball, which was kind of struggling at the time, or Clemson basketball. I covered it, on my sportscast. But as far as like nightly coverage, I mean, every night there was a very interesting or important basketball game to cover in the market. But no, we did pay a lot of attention to South Carolina and Clemson. Like in 1984, I covered just about every USC football game, the Black Magic season. Because back then, before they were in the SEC, they were playing a lot of North Carolina schools, NC State. They played NC State that year. They play East Carolina. So you cover a lot of their home and away games, just a couple hours trip.
Yeah. And like I said, on that USC note again, and we'll talk specifically football, because again, you've had the opportunity to cover so many great athletes, so many great coaches. But again, being a USC guy, I mean, I think specifically you've covered guys like Joe Morrison, Lou Holtz, Steve Spurrier. I mean, you think of all the great players. Obviously, this was just after, like right when you started, but George Rogers winning the Heisman. I mean, Sterling Sharp. I mean, you just go down the list of these great players. How awesome has it been for you? And as a media personality and a fan also, how crazy has it been to see the evolution of Gamecock football? I mean, just obviously we all want to talk about the 2010 to 2013 and where it really hit its peak under Steve. I mean, I know there were longtime Gamecock fans that I would speak to. And again, I look back on those days and I'm like, God, because I was a college kid at that point. Like, I really feel like I took it for granted. You know what I mean? I was like, man, we're just going to win, whatever. This is normal now. We just win 10 games a year. And it's like, when you spoke to the Gamecock fans who'd been watching the past 20, 30, 40 years, they'd give you a lot of perspective on like how special that run and how special it was, what Gamecock football was doing. But again, just speak on it a little bit, just seeing the evolution of Carolina football, all the great coaches, personalities you've gotten to cover. I'm sure that's certainly a highlight for you, kind of watching this thing evolve. And like I said, just getting to interact with some of the greatest coaches that not just even have coached at South Carolina, but in college football history.
You're right, especially Lou Holtz and Steve Spurrier. Those were some good years. And still, you kind of sit back and you go, wow, can't believe you got these legendary coaches working here at South Carolina, and you get to talk to them on a weekly basis. And so it was truly a special time because, yeah, I've seen a lot of bad Gamecock football over the years. And I think for some of the newer Gamecock fans who came along during the Holtz, Spurrier eras, they were spoiled. You know, it's like, and I tell people, hey, those 3 consecutive 11-2 seasons with Steve Spurrier, that was really special. And until someone else can do it, you know, I don't know of anyone who can really, and I know a lot of people are upset with the way Steve left.
Right.
But I said, you know, you really can't criticize the man that much for what he did in having those 3 11-2 seasons. Right. You know, everyone can be criticized, but until someone else can do it, I'm like, hey, that was the greatest era so far of Gamecock football.